What's going on, everybody? It's Ronnie at German Motors, and the topic of today's video is a question that gets asked all the time by both potential exotic car owners, general car enthusiasts, and even just the general public who are curious about all these exotic cars, and that is, how much does it actually cost to maintain an exotic car? And we have some really cool stuff in the shop today, so we thought it was a good opportunity to talk a little bit about that using a Lamborghini Huracan STO that we have in for standard maintenance as an example. So right now in the shop today, you can see that we have plenty of regular cars. We have an X5, Q5, a Lincoln, and X3 and E-Class getting work done over there. Most people are familiar with how much it costs to maintain those cars because those are the cars that most people drive. But there are other types of cars, like this GT3 Touring and this 458 Speciale, that people are more curious about the cost to maintain on because they know that they're really expensive to buy. This is almost $1 million car right here, so people think that the maintenance costs must be astronomical, and in some cases they are, but we wanted to talk about what it actually costs as an owner to maintain these cars. Obviously at German Motors, we work on these cars, so we have first-hand experience on the cost to own, both with routine maintenance and when things go wrong. So these two cars are downstairs, but the prime subject of today's video is upstairs. So let's go take a look. So this is the subject of today's video, a 2024 Lamborghini Huracan STO. This car is insane. I'm gonna take a second just to show you guys around this car a little bit before we talk about the maintenance costs, because if you haven't seen one yet, these cars are super cool. So the STO, this is a 2024 model. The STO is basically the most track-focused pinnacle form of the Huracan that you can get. It's based on previous track-focused iterations like the Performante, and it just takes it up a little bit of an extra step. So a lot of the bodywork is carbon fiber, and it's all one piece. So this car also has carbon ceramic brakes. We'll talk about that as it relates to maintenance costs because it's kind of an interesting point, and the aero on this thing is just absolutely nuts. You have the adjustable rear wing, obviously carbon. This rear shell is carbon, and it all comes off in one piece. You can tell just by kind of tapping it, it almost gives it like a feeling that it's flimsy, but in reality, it's just super lightweight. This car is all about 631 horsepower, and carbon body is, you know, the formula for track attack type of cars. So designed to be lightweight and super powerful. The interior is all carbon. The door pulls are made out of backpack straps. It probably saves you about 3 ounces, but why not? No carpets, carbon floor, super lightweight and really cool looking carbon seats, and some Alcantara on the dashboard just so it doesn't look totally stripped out, because at the end of the day it is a Lamborghini, and I don't think they could get away with selling a bare dashboard. So super cool car. But let's talk about the actual maintenance costs. And just so you guys know, the reason that we chose the STO as the topic of today's video, not the GT3 Touring or the 458 Speciale that you saw downstairs, is because this one is actually here today for standard maintenance. The Speciale is getting an exhaust, and the GT3 is getting some other stuff. But this car is just here for routine maintenance. The customer brought it in for its regular 1-year service interval. Obviously, these figures that I'm going to talk about as far as maintenance costs are going to be specific to the STO here. But generally speaking, the principle and the idea of what I'm saying as far as maintenance cost is going to be applicable to most exotic cars, because the truth about these types of cars is that people don't drive them. People buy them, and they sit in the garage for 350 days out of the year, and then they drive it that extra 15 days when they go to the car shows or to play golf once a year on a really nice day or what have you. So they don't get a ton of miles on them, and that actually factors in a ton to maintenance costs, and that's generally true of most exotic cars. How often do you see these cars out on the road? Basically never. It's because nobody drives them. And that's honestly the biggest deciding factor when it comes to maintenance costs. Now, the cars that do get miles on them, rack up way more maintenance costs. But as far as general exotic car ownership goes, they're very rarely driven, and that keeps your maintenance costs down. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But with that said, let's talk about what this car's here for, its standard 1-year service, how much that costs, and then how much it actually costs to keep the car going at the driving interval that most people will use for these cars, which is maybe 500 miles a year. So let's talk about it. So like I said, this STO is here for its regular once per year service, which is basically just an oil change and a checkup on the car, check on the tire wear, check on everything, make sure all is well. But the only actual work that is performed is an oil change. Now, on a car like this, it's not like, you know, your X3 where you can just pop the drain plug out, drain the oil, put in a new filter, fill it up, and be on your way. There is some more that goes into it. So for starters, you have to access the engine, which is a little bit more difficult. I'll actually show you guys how to do that because it's super cool. But one of the things with maintenance costs on these cars is that access to certain parts is not as straightforward as it is on most cars. So the STO has this little magnetic key that stores in the footwell, and then you just stick it into this little piece, turn it, push, and it pops open. So you do that on both sides. And then this piece would come loose. You can see that it's loose now. This is kind of a two-man job to get this piece actually off, so I am not going to attempt to do it myself, but we'll close it back up. So just so you guys can see, you have to lift the rear engine cover off because it's, you know, a one-piece carbon sort of deal. So that's part of it. But more than that, that's just to access the top of the engine to, you know, fill and get the filter out. But you also have 8 drain plugs underneath the car. So your car, my car, pretty much every other car that you see on the road has 1 drain plug, maybe 2. This car has 8. So you got to get it up in the air. You got to unscrew 8 drain plugs, drain the oil out, go back up top, fill it, put the filter on, etc. So the actual labor is pretty significantly more intensive than it would be on any other car. That's a big part of the cost. And then you have a bunch of oil. You have a V10 engine. This car takes more oil. Those are the two things that kind of, you know, influence the maintenance cost and make it a little bit more expensive. Now, as far as the actual cost, if you were to go to a Lamborghini dealership and just come in for your regular oil change, they charge you about $1,500. I was talking to Mo, the shop owner here at German Motors, about that cost. So he said it's about $1,500 if you were to take it to Lamborghini, have them do your oil change. That's a lot. You can take even a BMW that's, you know, expensive to maintain to a dealership and get an oil change for like 150 bucks. So you're at about 10 times the oil change cost on a Lamborghini. However, this car is a German Motors, not a Lamborghini dealership. So at German Motors, the oil change cost is closer to $800. So you save almost half your money by taking it to a trusted independent shop like us versus going to a Lamborghini dealership. And as you can see, we work on these cars all the time. Mo has been doing this for over a decade, and he has a really long list of clientele that trust him with $1 million cars like that Speciale that you saw downstairs. So take it to German Motors instead of Lamborghini and save yourself $800. So that is just the oil change cost. So now I was talking to Mo about how much these cars actually cost to maintain. He pointed out the oil change cost, and my reaction was, wow, that's expensive compared to what I'm used to paying for an oil change, 100 bucks, 200 bucks maybe. And then I asked again, so like, okay, that's oil change costs. Now, what does it cost to do brakes and tires and a coolant flush, spark plugs, coils, all these things that you do on normal cars? And his answer kind of surprised me, and hopefully it'll be interesting to you guys because it was interesting to me. And he said that he doesn't really do that type of work on these sorts of exotic cars. And that sort of ties into what I was saying before, which is these cars do not get driven. This car has 800 miles on it. They just don't get driven enough to cost a lot to maintain compared to your regular cars. So as an example, I asked how much it costs to do a brake job on this car, expecting an answer somewhere with, you know, a ridiculous number, $15,000, $20,000. Now, if you ever actually had to replace these brakes, they're gigantic carbon ceramic discs with fancy brake pads, and I would expect them to probably cost about $15,000 to $20,000 to replace. But the truth is, the owners never replace them. They're carbon ceramic brakes. they last forever. They last the life of the car. These cars don't get more than 10, 15,000 miles on them. The brakes will way outlast that. So you don't have to do brakes on these cars. I asked him how much something like a coolant flush costs. And he said that he's never done a coolant flush on one of these cars, not because of inexperience, but because nobody does. These cars just don't get driven enough to require the routine maintenance. The only thing he did mention is spark plugs. That's something you could do every once in a while. If you do have a high mileage car that's in a 5-digit mile range, then you can do spark plugs. And he told me that the cost for that would be around $2,000 to $2,500 on a car like this. Obviously, there's 10 spark plugs, and it's going to take a little bit more labor to actually get to them because it's a unique car. But the truth is, these cars just don't get driven enough to really rack up maintenance costs. So when you see them on the road and think, wow, that guy must spend a fortune just keeping that thing on the road, he probably doesn't. He spent a fortune to buy it, and he spends a fortune to insure it, and taxes and all that stuff. So there are some really significant ownership costs to cars like this and cars like that. However, maintenance really isn't one of them. Do your oil change. You're going to do your tires. I should mention tires are probably around $1,500 to $2,000 if you need them. If you don't drive it that often, you won't need to do tires, but you should do them every 4 or 5 years just to keep them fresh. Or if you're tracking the car like it's meant to be driven, you're going to burn through some tires and you'll have to do tires, but that'll be about $1,500 to $2,000. That's what it costs to maintain a Lamborghini. To answer the title to this video, not that much. Do an oil change once a year for around, $1,000. Spark plugs every once in a blue moon, maybe some tires. That's pretty much it. These cars are actually super reliable, the Huracan itself. Now that is the story with the Huracan. As an example, we have a different Lamborghini over here. This is a Murcielago, one of my favorite all-time cars. This car is actually getting a manual transmission swap at some point. So beautiful Murcielago in the correct color. So super cool car, but this one is obviously a lot older than that one. So this is where things can change a little bit and actually become expensive, because while that car is fresh and new and low mileage, the Murcielago or some older exotics are not fresh and new. They are still often low mileage, but they're not fresh and new. So on the Huracan, you're never gonna have to do anything related to age, at least not in the next decade, most likely. On cars like a Murcielago, these cars can sit for 20 years at this point, and things can just degrade due to age. And that is where exotic car ownership gets super expensive. If any of the rubbers or the gaskets or anything like that start to go, just from sitting. Let's say you need to do a rear main seal or something like that on a Murcielago, you're going to be spending a lot of money. So age can cost you money with exotic car ownership, which is not an issue on cars like the STO. So when people think, oh my gosh, those cars must be super insanely expensive to maintain, that can be true of these cars, but it's generally not true of the newer exotics that you see out on the road. These older exotics are extremely complex, and they're not as modern or reliable. So things will actually go wrong on this car, whereas they generally won't on a newer Huracan, at least not for a long time. So if you're resealing the engine, if you're fixing leaks, or if you're diagnosing issues that can arise on cars like this due to old age, that's when you can start spending big money on maintaining an exotic car. For example, Doug DeMuro, as everybody knows, has a Countach, and he has made some videos on what it takes to keep that car running and in good shape, and it was a lot. I think he said his bill was somewhere in, wow, look at that orange color in the sun, sorry, I got distracted, in the neighborhood of, $80,000-ish just to get his Countach up to par. That's the kind of money that you can spend on older exotics, but it's the kind of money that you won't have to spend on a car like this until it's 30 years old. So modern exotic car ownership can be pretty painless, actually, in terms of maintenance costs, whereas old exotic car ownership can be just the opposite. It can cost you a lot of money. So upstairs we were talking about the STO compared to the Murcielago in terms of maintenance costs, how the STO being new and modern doesn't cost that much, whereas the Murcielago being old and potentially needing significant work can cost a lot more to maintain. And I came downstairs and thought of kind of a funny point, was talking to Mo, and we looked at this car, which is just here for an oil change. This actually happens to be my RS4, but we were agreeing that this car is probably more expensive to maintain than the STO that you see upstairs. The STO needs an oil change once a year, tires, maybe spark plugs in 10 years or something like that. Whereas this car, which gets driven, it has about 100,000 miles, can cost a lot to maintain when you have things go wrong with it. Right now it's just an oil change, thank God, but a lot of the times it's more than just an oil change. So it's kind of funny when people look at this car, they might think it's just an old Audi, it's probably unreliable, but it probably doesn't cost that much to maintain, at least to the average person. Whereas when they see the STO upstairs, they're probably thinking that it costs an arm and a leg, and it's actually backwards. This car is probably more expensive to maintain than the STO because it's a, you know, super or sports sedan from 15 years ago. It uses Gallardo brakes, and it has this high revving, pretty specific engine that they only used in this car and the R8 and some weird Q7 variants. So these can cost quite a bit to maintain, as can cars like the E92 M3 and the AMGs of the era and older Porsches and things like that. So it really goes to show you that age and complexity in combination are what drive up maintenance costs, not just the actual expense of the car. So just because it's an exotic car does not make it expensive to maintain, but what does is old, complex cars like an RS4, like an E92 M3, like a C5 RS6, all of these cars, B5 S4s are notoriously wallet killers. So cars like that can be expensive. The STO really isn't. So we were just talking about how sometimes cars like this can be more expensive than the STO that you see upstairs. Rather than take my word for it, Mo is doing a quick oil change on my car. Mo, would you agree that cars like a B7 RS4, an E90 M3, E46, cars like that are generally more expensive to maintain than like newer exotics?
1000%. The fact that, one, you daily these a lot more than an STO or a Huracan, Evo. You religiously have to do oil changes on these cars more often because of the rod bearing issues they had with these.
On the M3s?
On the M3s, and on these, I think there was something wrong with these too. I
carbon
think it was
buildup.
Carbon buildup.
You got to get them. I had mine carbon clean when I first got it.
Yeah, you have to like carbon clean them every like 30 or 40,000 miles.
Yeah. And what did you just tell me, which I didn't know, which is kind of a bummer, that is wrong with my car right now?
Oh, your passenger side axle is leaking.
So there you go. I did the driver's side axle when I bought it, and now the passenger side axle
needs to be replaced.
Great. So there you go. I didn't know that before I brought it in. So that's good news.
Overall, though, I mean, for the life of the car, the year of the car, this one's probably one of the cleanest ones.
Oh, nice. I'll take that.
Yeah.
So even one of the cleanest ones is going to need an axle replaced. So that's just a function of age and mileage. Those are the things that you're not going to have to do on newer exotics. What do you think the cost to replace that axle is off the top of your head? Just ballpark.
Ballpark, you're looking around probably like $1,200 parts and labor.
There you go. So something like that, $1,200 isn't something that you're going to have to spend on those newer exotics. So it just goes to show these sorts of older but still complex cars are way more expensive than newer exotics. And then when you go up to older exotics, that's like peak maintenance cost nightmares. So kind of a funny example, just in for an oil change and you rack up a repair bill for a front axle. That's sort of the experience with these sort of older German cars. So there you guys have it. You heard it from Mo firsthand. He's been running German motors for over 10 years, working on these cars for a while and has a ton of experience. Newer exotics are pretty cheap to maintain, believe it or not. The older exotics can be an absolute nightmare, and then the non-exotic but complex, sporty sedans, coupes, European cars from 15 plus years ago are probably the most expensive to maintain, with the exception of the older exotics, which are that on another level. So I'm glad that we have the RS4 here to make that point, the STO and the Murcielago. We have the three levels of car maintenance costs. You have super expensive with the Mercy, the RS4 downstairs, pretty expensive, and the STO, pretty easy to own. So with that said, that is going to do it for today's video. Hopefully it gives you guys a little bit of insight into what it's like to own a newer exotic, an older exotic, and a non-exotic, just expensive old Audi like the RS4, and the same thing would apply to a BMW or a Mercedes from the same era. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel if you think that we deserved it. We will see you in the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.